Testing, 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 testing. Testing, testing. Hi, can you hear me? Hi, testing. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Testing, testing. Hi, everyone. Happy Sunday. I just started the live stream. We'll give it a few more minutes before we begin. We'll let others join the session. First off, I just wanted to thank you all for joining. Hope you are having a nice Sunday so far. We will begin in a few minutes, so just hang on tight and we'll get started. I have a lot to cover, lots of valuable insights to share with you all. So thank you. We'll give it a few more minutes. So just hang on tight. You know, we'll be talking about just overall Bitcoin news, any questions, insights you may have, requests, just put it in the chat. We'll cover all of that. Hi, Yehem Stone. Thank you for joining. And let me know where you are watching from. I'm curious to know who you are, where you're watching from. I'd love to hear all of that. So put it in the chat before we get started. All right, so perhaps we can go ahead and get started. Looks like we have a couple folks joining, and whoever joins on later, we'll welcome those who join on at a later time. But first off, the goal of this live session today is really to share information around what's going on with the Bitcoin community, stocks, finance. We'll cover the latest macro scale updates. What does this mean for the price of Bitcoin? And is there potential with Bitcoin making a run up, or is it going to continue to go down with all of these macro scale news? We'll also be doing technical analysis of Bitcoin strategy and the miners, along with any other stocks that you'd like for me to cover. We'll go through all of that. So thank you all for joining. We'll go ahead and get started. So first off, we're looking at Bitcoin price. So what happened in today's market early Sunday, 6 a.m. Pacific time, Bitcoin was hovering around that sub 10300. It's been hovering in the 100,000 for like over 40 days, and all of a sudden it started, pulling back. It got down to like 98,000. Where we are right now, we're getting the big time whales buying up Bitcoin. I mean, buying below 100,000 is really the discount now, the new norm. I mean, the fact that Bitcoin has been over 100,000 for 40 something days, think about it. This is the new support level at 100K. This is very bullish. Why is Bitcoin dropping? So, according to CoinMarketCap, we all know that there was the heightened tension between the US and Iran with the bombing of the facilities, with the airstrikes that took place with Iranian nuclear sites. Now, the key thing is war hasn't even broken out yet. The US is just targeting those facilities. it wasn't targeting the civilians, military, or anything like that. It's more, trying to control nuclear power. And with the technical breakdown, I mean, with Bitcoin getting below that 105K support, that transition towards, a bearish MACD with relative strength going down. And this caused a huge liquidation. And a lot of people are wondering, how is the market going to look tomorrow? So futures are pointing towards potential upside or, downside. We don't know yet. It'll all come out by Monday. We'll see how things go. But, what we're seeing right now is, Bitcoin reversing right now, getting back up to that 100,869. So it's looking very good. Hi, Robbie. Thank you for joining. I hope you're doing well I believe you're out in Singapore. That's where you're from, right, Robbie? I believe. Welcome, welcome. I hope everyone is doing well. We'll continue to go forward with updates, but Bitcoin is, with that pullback that we had hours ago, we're seeing this, this upward motion. I mean, people are buying the dips. Dips are gifts. Bitcoin is going to continue to go up. And here's an interesting post. Donald Trump, he posted yesterday, I'm sure all of us are aware of this, in that the US, they attacked Iran, and now it's it's a matter of playing chess right now. How is Iran going to react to this? I don't think there's going to be countries like China or Russia getting involved. Russia is heavily involved with Ukraine right now. China is more so just eyeing Taiwan. I think all of this right now is just showing US dominance. We have the best military technology out there. We have way more aircrafts than any other country to date. When it comes to nuclear bombs, I mean, we're slightly behind Russia, but in terms of like the aircraft and, ocean technology, we dominate. And that's why the US can do things like this, take control. And I think this is why, we're looking very positive. So, welcome everyone. Happy Sunday. Let's continue to talk Bitcoin. So, I wanted to first off just give you an overview of Bitcoin. We're looking at, Bitcoin Magazine Pro, and they put out this lovely visual in that, Bitcoin Magazine Pro has this 200-week moving average heat map. Why is this important? So, let's go through the indicator overview. So Bitcoin's price historically bottoms out around the 200-week moving average. This indicator uses color heat map based on the percentage increases of that 200-week moving average. So how can it be used? Historically, when we see orange and red dots assigned to the price chart, this has been a good time to sell Bitcoin as the market overheats. Now, what it says is periods where the price dots are purple and close to the 200-week moving average have historically been good times to buy. So what does this say? They're saying that based on this indicator, anytime when we see orange and red dots, which we haven't seen yet in this cycle, that's an indicator for Bitcoin to be, extremely overbought with the high, RSI. So what they're saying is that the purple and blue dots is the indicator to buy. The fact that Bitcoin hasn't even experienced that breakout yet with orange red dots, we're still early right now. Bitcoin hasn't broken out yet, and it definitely looks like we're going to see that big run up according to the 200-week moving average heat map. So this is a good thing. I wouldn't worry so much with all of the macro scale updates. Bitcoin by design will only get more and more scarce, and as a result, it has a compensatory mechanism for price action to continue to go up. Let's couple that with Bitcoin Rainbow price chart. So what we're looking at is, just different color shades of the rainbow, and the vertical lines that we see represent every Bitcoin halving event. So the recent Bitcoin halving event took place last year back in April. And as we look at the current price hovering, it's hovering in that light green shade. You look at the legend, that stands for accumulate. Okay, the next tier up would be that it's still cheap. And then the next tier up is HODL. We hold on dear life right now. What happens after that? Orange is this a bubble? The next tier up, FOMO starts intensifying. This is when the herd comes in. So think about it this way: 95% of Bitcoin have already been mined, and 95% of the entire population hasn't even touched Bitcoin yet. They're beginning to hear more about Bitcoin, but they haven't embraced it. They haven't opened up to Bitcoin where they bought any crypto or anything like that. So once the 95% remaining population gets involved, what do you think is going to happen to that 5% that's remaining with Bitcoin? FOMO is going to intensify, and then we're going to have the price action get into that orange, into that, that light red sell, seriously sell, and then we're going to be in that maximum bubble territory where the red dots will start kicking in this cycle. But overall, as a long-term view of Bitcoin, Bitcoin will continue to go up, similar to how Saylor is saying it, for the next 21 years, Bitcoin is going to 21 million. So the unique thing is Saylor, he actually doubled his forecast in that he went from 13 million in the next 20 years to 21 million dollars per Bitcoin. So that tells you a lot. Okay, so Moha, hi. Are you guys able to hear me? Please let me know. I could definitely change the settings, but is everyone able to hear me? Okay, cool. Thank you, Katie. Thanks for joining, everyone. All right. I just saw that chat from Moha that the sound is bad, so I hope that it all works out. Okay, so we'll just continue. So thank you all for joining. uh, you know, um, a lot going on with all of the macro updates. So let's say if you missed the early session, uh, Bitcoin is hovering back. Look, it's at 100,000, 101,000 right now. People started buying that dip. Whales believe in it. Who knows? Is it Sailor buying up, the Bitcoin right now? Is it Semler Scientific? Is it Meta Planet? Things are getting bought up right now. It may be that public companies are buying the dips, which is why price action is going up right now. But here's an interesting take. BlackRock, 11 point trillion $11.5 trillion financial institution. They're buying Bitcoin like there's no tomorrow. In fact, they have more Bitcoin than Strategy, close to about 700,000 Bitcoins on their balance sheet. And they've been buying just recently, right? Why? They have the money to do so and they believe in the ecosystem. Their cost average is much higher than Sailor. Well, granted, BlackRock is a much bigger company. That's why they have that power to do so. But Larry Fink is saying every millionaire in the US asked their financial advisor to get them one Bitcoin. There wouldn't be enough. Again, 95% of the population hasn't even bought any Bitcoin yet. So it'll be even harder for these millionaires to even buy Bitcoin, let alone the billionaires. Here's an interesting visual, huge news I want to announce. Arizona, New Hampshire got Bitcoin enacted. We heard about that several weeks back, and it's just been a big break in between. I was actually, making a video yesterday in that Texas, they were at that chamber too, and it was just until yesterday, right after an hour after that video post, where Texas officially enacted Texas Strategic Bitcoin Reserve. Now they have $500 billion assets where they could leverage that money to potentially buy Bitcoin. So now it's written into law. Texas, a big state, you can think of Texas as like California, but now that Texas got approval, think about all of the other states that have submitted their proposal for SBR. It's only going to start expediting very quickly. But this is a big signal upside for Bitcoin because we've been hearing a lot about the Bitcoin Act of 2025 from Senator Cynthia Lummis. None of that has really come into fruition yet. We haven't heard about any states buying Bitcoin, not even at the federal level. But think about it this way: as we're hearing more and more Bitcoin purchases from financial institutions, from public companies, from retail, the government's going to be like, hey, I mean, with Bitcoin, I mean, it's getting more and more scarce. We should think about hurrying this up and start buying Bitcoin. The US they have a plan to buy 1 million Bitcoins in the next 5 years, but if they don't start soon, it's going to get more and more expensive. So, huge milestone achievement. Texas Governor Greg Abbott signed Texas Strategic Bitcoin Reserve. Future of finance is digital and the future of capital formation is in Texas. So definitely a big milestone achievement. And this is really going to drive up the price of Bitcoin. We look at Bitcoin price right now, over 100,000 again. So nothing to worry about. Yes, we had, the bombing that took place, but this is just, a chess move right now to show United States dominance. And to me, I don't think there's going to be any World War III that's going to be playing out or anything like that. You think about it, it's just more of, trying to prevent nuclear dominance and to have the United States maintain that power. So we're looking at a visual from HODL 15. So top 100 companies. So you look at rank 100, Athena Bitcoin, 17 Bitcoins. I mean, that's a pretty high number. But when you scale to like top 50, Advanced Biotech, 254 Bitcoin. I mean, that's a lot of money. When you look at top 20, what's top 20? Nexon, a Japanese company, 1,700. I mean, MetaPlanet was somewhere around that 1,000 range, but they just leaped ahead, went from like top 30 to now, in the top 10 zone. MetaPlanet over, 10,000, Bitcoins, bypassing Coinbase and Semler Scientific. In fact, Semler Scientific, they announced an aggressive roadmap to acquire, hundreds of thousands of Bitcoins in the next 3 years. So that's all going to be to push up to the top 10. We also heard about 21, CEP Cantor Fitzgerald partnering up with Tether and, Cantor Fitzgerald with stable coins. They have, close to about, over 40,000 Bitcoin. We also have the big three Bitcoin miners like Mara, 49,000, Riot, close to 20,000, CleanSpark, 12,500 Bitcoin, Hut 8, the Trump family's involved with that. So I think that as soon as we have Bitcoin taking a leap of faith and start appreciating, it's going to be very favorable for these companies that have a big hodl of Bitcoin, and the market sentiment is really going to drive forward. Um, Okay, so looks like Katie with the comment. I'm sure miners will dump hard in the morning. Why wouldn't they? Yeah, you bring up a good point, Katie. And I think, the bears are really going to drive fear, uncertainty, and it's all going to be dependent on how the markets open tomorrow. So, the first hour is really going to be critical. Miners can drop, Bitcoin can drop, but let's say if the market opens green and Bitcoin starts, showing signs of a run up, then we may very well have the miners go up. So it's really a 50-50 right now. We don't know, but definitely potential for, a sell off. Who knows? Only time will tell. But where there's, sell-offs, dips are gifts if you have that propensity to be able to, dollar cost average. So Sailor poses, nothing stops this orange. So, this actually comes from the Breaking Bad. So I'm sure most of you have watched Breaking Bad already. If you hadn't already done so, I would recommend watching that show. Back in 2010 was when that show came about. But it really stemmed from the phrase "nothing stops this train." In fact, at the Bitcoin conference, listening to Lynn Alden, I mean, she put up a lovely presentation, really using visuals to explain how the United States deficit will continue to get worse, and with job employment, all of that, we continue to see the U.S. deficit going up, but nothing stops this train. I mean, it's not going to get better. The only solution to that is really Bitcoin. Bitcoin is accretive in nature. There's only 21 million left, and look at Sailor, using that same analogy but twisting it to Bitcoin. Nothing stops this orange. So, I look at it as nothing stops this beast. Why? I mean, strategy, they have such a big hodl. They've been doing this for many years now, almost 6 years. So it'll be interesting to see like how much Bitcoin strategy will announce tomorrow. BitGrid is saying, will we see 600,000 total on Monday for strategy? Who knows? It may be very well 600,000 tomorrow, or is it going to be like a 800 Bitcoin purchase? Only time will tell, but it looks very favorable to see an even number, 600,000. So definitely some huge upside. So here's an interesting takeaway. So the fact that we're getting close to the end of June, we have about like 8 days left. This is really going to be favorable for companies that hold on to Bitcoin on their balance sheet. The more Bitcoin you hold, the more profits you're going to generate. Why? Because during Q1, Bitcoin was way below in terms of the price value. So with the accounting change with the FASB, we heard a lot about that. Now companies are able to reflect on their accounting statement, their income statement, a net revenue income based on the fair value at the end of every quarter when you're, updating your accounting data. So let's say Bitcoin hovers above $100,000. That's going to be the value from end of June from the end of March. Obviously, we see like a big, 25 to 30,000 increase with every single Bitcoin that you hold on to. So if you look at how strategy will be able to generate, you know, unrealized gains, Q2 is going to be, a huge announcement for strategy. I mean, no analysts are forecasting the gap changes Bitcoin from impairment to profit, according to this statement. When retail markets see the numbers, we know our coming faces will melt. Bitcoin at 104K gives strategy profit of over 1100 per share with a PE ratio of 22. That equates to 5,700 share price. Be ready. So definitely, I think that it hasn't been priced in yet. So with earnings report coming next month, this is really going to favor strategy as well as the big time miners that have a big hodl on their balance sheet. All right, so let me know what comments or questions you have in a chat. I'll continue to move forward with the updates, and then we'll also be looking at technical analysis. So, I would highly recommend following Chris Millis. He's definitely posting really, good stuff, about Bitcoin Treasury companies. So he actually created a scorecard to evaluate Bitcoin Treasury companies, looking at leadership, right? It's important to have a strong leader who could really, show to investors, leadership confidence. Because when there's confidence, trust, and respect, that's when investors invest in your company, along with the methods for, gaining capital. So, like, what are the strategies in place? So, MSTR has issued ATMs, converts, preferred equity, and strategy has created a flywheel as well. Feeling more capital to use that money to buy up Bitcoin, such as Strike, Stripe, and Stride, and that attracts investors who want a fixed dividend income, like 10% payout every month. So that's definitely bringing in more value to the company, where Sailor will use those funds to buy up more Bitcoin. And again, sentiment is very important because everything comes with ebbs and flows. Right now, when it comes to market sentiment, are we seeing high grade value of market sentiment with strategy? Not as big as companies like Metaplanet, right? I mean, there's so much market sentiment. Volume's been increasing in the Japan market. A lot of people are buying hot, stocks, with companies embracing Bitcoin. Why is it that market sentiment isn't as high for strategy when they've been in the game for so long? So those are the factors to also consider, along with runway as well. How much potential is there to generate Bitcoin yield? So here's an interesting visual where we currently look at, the market sentiment, just looking at the different Bitcoin treasury companies. So MSTR, they're solid on leadership, tranches, flywheel. Sentiment, not so good, 2 points. And then you have 2 points for a one way. But when you look at Metaplan, I mean, they're hitting everything in green right now, with the light green in two areas. ALTBG as well. Semler Scientific, I mean, not scoring so high. Flywheel and market sentiment is bad. I mean, Semler Scientific, had a pullback recently along with strategy. But does this mean that, with this aggressive plan of buying 100,000 Bitcoin, can Semler Scientific and strategy flip the switch from red and orange to green? Everything comes in ebbs and flows. These Bitcoin treasury companies, money flows in and out very quickly. So I think, that's how people are making a lot of money right now with the companies with, above 90%. How long can it maintain that above 90%? I think there's just going to be ebbs and flows where you see a company like Semler Scientific with a total score of 56%. I think there's going to be some resource allocations, from, overperformers to the underperformers with Semler Scientific and strategy, which is why I'm very bullish that strategy is going to have a big breakout just based on the fundamentals. It's solid. It's going to be a multi-trillion-dollar company. Just market sentiment right now isn't as good, but the money is going to start flowing in, where people take profits and start flooding back into the safe haven of strategy based on the current price being below $400. All right. So I hope this is, helping everyone see how we look at different Bitcoin treasury companies. Let's take a look at Bitcoin with where we are right now. So Bitcoin at 100,906. There was a lot of uncertainty in the morning today in Sunday's market, but it looks like we're climbing back up. Yes, not as good as, when we were in the high 110 range, but definitely good to see that we have a bounce back into the 100,000. Is there potential for Bitcoin to go down even further? Yes, it's possible, but I do think that 96,000 is going to be that major support. We must stay above 96,000. In fact, Josh Mandel, he's forecasting that we're going to end, the month of June above 115,000. So if we follow Josh Mandel's forecast, we're looking bullish in the next few days. So hopefully, let's see where we end up with the last updates. Okay, so now that we've covered scorecard, let's take a look at the next update. So strategy posted. So here's an interesting take. Posted the Bitcoin playbook, invited the world. I mean, just take a look at this visual for a second. What is this telling you? Strategy. I mean, there's truly no second best. Yes, that's why it has a share price of hundreds of dollars. We have Mara, extremely undervalued right now. The price is definitely undervalued. I do see value there. Cantor Fitzgerald, I mean, it opened up at like $12. It ran up to like 60 currently, still undervalued. Riot, it had a big breakdown to like $6. It's slowly climbing back. I mean, it just recently hit double digits. It's extremely undervalued as well. But you look CleanSpark as well. I see CleanSpark extremely undervalued as well. And you have up and coming companies like, Hut 8, Metaplanet, trying, the top 10 companies I think are extremely undervalued. And as soon as Bitcoin starts making that next level tier run up, it's going to be very favorable for the share price for the big hodl companies. Here's an interesting post I want to call out. So Chilbo's Swaggins. He's posting, Riot, here is the full picture. Keep in mind the majority of the parabolic run happened in a 3 to 4 month span. So here's one interesting thing. It's important that we look at, whether it's Mara, Riot, CleanSpark, Iron. When one miner runs, that's going to be complementary for other miners like CleanSpark and Mara and Iron. So taking Riot into context, the every Bitcoin bull cycle historically, we've seen Riot run up as well as CleanSpark and Mara. So back during the 2012 run up, it took 487 days for that run up, and then the next halving event after that, 2016, it took 518 days for that run up. The last Bitcoin bull cycle, when it went from $2 to $80, 278 days. So if we were to forecast to today's forecast, 2020, that took place 278 days. So we haven't seen that happen yet with the run up. Where we're currently expecting it, based on the data points from the last few halving events, is somewhere around that September timeframe, if that's the case. So definitely very bullish. Who knows? Will history repeat itself? If so, then in the next couple months, we're going to see very possible breakouts with the Bitcoin miners. Here's an interesting post from my friend Sabtastic. So he's a big time believer of Mara. If you're a believer of Mara, I would recommend following Subtastic. He's saying something is brewing. This is under the highest volume and almost at the top of the list. We're looking at barchart.com. I mean, Mara on the list right now. You see like Nvidia, Coinbase, Strategy, but folks are putting calls in place right now. I mean, 22,000 change with call options going on for this price strike. So definitely something is brewing. There's lots of volume upside. People do see the undervalued play. I mean, Mara is the second biggest HODL company, but the current price at less than $15. That's a huge anomaly. We've seen Mara stock price at $30. So definitely there's huge upside that's going to be coming. All right, so Max from Munich. So if you're a CleanSpark follower, I would recommend following, Max from Germany. I mean, he's posting that CleanSpark isn't Iran, CleanSpark isn't inflation, CleanSpark isn't war. CleanSpark is backed by the best asset in the world, nearly over 12,500 Bitcoin. Yesterday, CleanSpark hit the best mining day ever. 24 will be the new benchmark. Yes, the current stock price isn't sexy, but CleanSpark is a high-speed boat for Santa Claus. So definitely every day mining 24 Bitcoins. You think about it, every hour you have a Bitcoin award going to CleanSpark. So you look at price of Bitcoin, 100,000 every hour you're generating 100,000 revenue. That's really good. So kudos to CleanSpark's team and more to come. All right, so Katie, very bullish with CleanSpark, sold a bunch of SoFi. I'm glad that you made some profits with SoFi, so congratulations on that, Katie. And then for CleanSpark, definitely undervalued. Buy low, sell high. So you bought in at the low. Things are going to look very good for CleanSpark. Let's take a look at some technical analysis of Bitcoin. So I like using Ichimoku Cloud. I also like, okay, I'm just going to remove the volume. All right, and then we'll add on moving crosses. So let's scale this out to 1 week. So what are we seeing? So on the weekly chart, we see, okay, so on the weekly, we see, moving average, we crossed the moving average, the 21 to the 9 week moving average. Ichimoku cloud, not so much information there, but we scaled to the 1 day. Key thing is we got out of that, that stormy weather back in like April, and we've been hovering above 100K since May 8th. So over 40 days, and it was until today where we got below 100,000. Now we're back above 100,000. This is a battle right now. So the bears and the bulls are going to war right now. I think what's favoring the bulls is the new whales buying in at these prices. People understand that Bitcoin was hovering above 100,000 for 40 days. That brings in investor confidence. People who hold on to Bitcoin, they're long-term holders, but people who don't have Bitcoin, who have the money, they like seeing Bitcoin at these prices. They will buy and hold as they do see the value in Bitcoin. So that favors the bulls as well. So it's definitely important to see where this is going to be headed. you know, is it going to go below the cloud or above the cloud? Key thing is we want to maintain support around that 96,000. If we maintain that support above 96,000, things haven't broken down yet. We're still in that bullish, territory. It'll be interesting to see whether we can, get above that Ichimoku cloud, get back into that 103,000 before market open. That would be even better. But definitely some huge war going on between the Bulls and the Bears right now. I'm just going to put in the chat. Do you see? Okay, so I have a question in the chat. I'd love to hear your perspective. What are your thoughts? Is Bitcoin going to be over 105,000 before the end of June, or do you think that as we head towards June 30th, will Bitcoin be below 105,000? Put your responses in the chat. All right, let's move on to more technical analysis updates before we start looking at the miners. So we're looking at strategy at $369. Definitely undervalued. Current price, 369 compared to 369 last year is much different. Everything is accretive in nature. Strategy has the biggest hodl. The fundamentals are great. Companies just going to continue growing. And I think as we get towards the Q2 updates at the end of July, I think we're going to hear more from Saylor about S&P inclusion. Coinbase got into S&P 500, so this is going to be very favorable for strategy in that they will get into the S&P 500 just with the changes to the accounting rule with FASB. Last 5 quarters, they were able to prove that they've generated income with the changes to how they market fair value Bitcoin to their balance sheet. Next week, it'll be interesting to see where MSTR is headed. But you know what? I think as we head into the Q3, Q4, I think what's really going to drive up price of strategy is the Q2 results as well as any stimulant for Bitcoin to run up. Strategy is going to run up as well. Um, you know, will Bitcoin take that next leap of faith, getting into that $120,000? It'll be interesting to see how Bitcoin behaves. But before we talk about 150, 200, 250,000, let's see when Bitcoin can get to 120,000. I think that it may very well be achievable in the month of July. Who knows when that's going to be the case, but I do see upside this year. Tom Lee still remains bullish Bitcoin to 150 to 250,000. What does this mean for strategy? I truly believe that strategy has potential to break out. Definitely undervalued. This isn't financial advice. Let's say if you don't hold on to strategy, if you do, dollar cost average definitely undervalued because there's upside right now with this price point. We've seen it reach 400, over 400 on multiple occurrences, and it's only a matter of time for strategy share price to gap up from here on out. So definitely upside. I'm also very bullish on Riot Platforms as well. So it's looking favorable for a big time Bitcoin miner like Riot with close to 20,000 Bitcoins on their balance sheet. Key thing we're seeing, inverse head and shoulder. It gapped up to level one prior resistance. This is the new support. It got to that prior resistance at 1018. Current price, it slightly dropped back down to 956. As long as we continue to see it hover to the prior resistance where that is the new support level, we're going to test that level two resistance, $12, and then we're just going to keep climbing up. It's only a matter of time. I mean, you look at the history of Riot. Last Bitcoin halving event, it ran from like $3 to $80. It's only a matter of time where these miners can have big time breakouts. Let's take a look at Mara. Mara at $14, definitely undervalued, definitely a steal. We have this bullish pennant flag drawn out from the last halving event. Last halving event, what happened? It went from like $2 all the way up to like, you know, $80. And since then, nothing's happened. So the fact that we're getting close to that time when it previously broke out, Mara has that potential to run up as well. And for every halving event, these OG miners tend to have a breakout session. It may have a breakout not to the level of what we saw $3 to 80, but we could potentially see like a 3 to 10x from, a company like Mara. So anything is possible. Where there's volatility, there's vitality with huge, upside. These type of plays, definitely high risk, but the awards are there if you're positioned right. Let's also take a look at CleanSpark. So CleanSpark, I definitely see value in CleanSpark as well. Why is that the case? I mean, you look at the technicals. I mean, we've seen the potential with CleanSpark back in 2023 from $3. It ran all the way up to like $24 within a matter of weeks. That's 800% gain. Since then, when the RSI broke out above 80, it's been taking a big pullback. I mean, it hasn't really run up since then, but the last halving event back in 2020, it had a big run. It was like $40 as well. It was up until like 2023 when we saw that run up from 3 to 24. Since then, it's been just bleeding out. But key thing that we're seeing on the technicals is an inverse head and shoulder as well. That's a key signal we want to see for a breakout. And what's key is it's trending lower lows, lower highs, but what goes down will eventually pop back up. The fact that it's been just bleeding out, I mean, it had that, slight run up back in November up to $18, but from a long-term scale, it's still in this long-term bull flag. I definitely see it breaking out of this, and the bulls will be in favor, will take charge. These Bitcoin miners, will take action, especially the miners that have a hodl. I mean, there's a lot of competition now, but if you have, Bitcoin on your balance sheet, that's really going to reflect as a positive variable for a sector that has, a large number of competitors. All right, so let's take a look at where we are with Bitcoin. So current price at, getting close to that 101,000. So looking very good. I hope that this live session is giving you some insight. But what are your thoughts, everyone? Like, are we going to see Bitcoin get back into that 105,000? What's going to happen in tomorrow's market? Does Are you suspecting a pullback, or are you suspecting for Bitcoin to run up from here on out? I'm also going to bring up some additional plays that I think have value. All right, so Robbie, depends on Iran, definitely. I definitely do think that there's lots of uncertainty going on right now. All depends on whether this is just going to be heightened, tension. But here's an interesting stock. This is an ETF that I think has potential. ETHE. So if you're looking for a potential play, very bullish on ETHE. This thing can have a nice run up. Um, just looking at it from on a. Let me just change the chart range. Okay, with ETHE, this thing, ran up to like $34. Where it currently is, definitely undervalued. I would, if let's say you believe in Ethereum, I definitely do see the value in ETHE. So be on the lookout for this ETF as well. Um, at one point, it was like close to $50. Where it currently is at 20, huge upside. I think ETHE is going to print. If you want to look at another hot play, I definitely do see upside with DJT stock. You know, why do I like DJT? I mean, DJT, they just got approval for um, they just got approval for buying Bitcoin and Ethereum, and they're working with crypto.com exchange. The fact that SEC just approved them for 2.5 billion, now DJT the corporation can buy Bitcoin. They can use that money to buy. And the fact that Bitcoin price just dropped, who knows? DJT, partnership, they may have, took that leap of faith and bought Bitcoin. But why do I like DJT? I mean, this puppy was like $53 back in like October, November. So since then, it's dropped down so much, $17. I do think that it's going to start printing as we head into the second half of the year, onward to next year. So definitely undervalued. DJT is going to have a big breakout. So be on the lookout for that. All right, so Robbie, I think gas might be $5 a gallon by then. Oh yes, I mean gas is going to go up for sure. You look at oil companies, USO. I mean USO is going to be going up. I think that's going to favor oil companies. Um, USO might shoot up even more. Just anything that's oil based, military, advanced technology, AI, things are going to run up. You know, um, Here's another one I'd like to share. BBAI might have a breakout as well, so be on the lookout for BBAI if you like AI based companies. I mean, this puppy ran to like $10. Back in February. It's been pulling back, but it's creating that cup and handle. Eventually we're going to see that U-shaped formation, V-shaped formation, so you could definitely make some quick bucks on BBAI. Another one I want to share is artificial intelligence super cycle, AIS. This is an ETF. They hold on to like the top AI based companies. Obviously we saw oversold situation back in April, when it went from like $18 to 26. Fairly new ETF. It holds, very valuable AI companies like SK Hynix. SK Hynix, they're like, a Korean-based company, also in the United States as well. So AIS does hold 5% of SK Hynix as well as other companies out there. So definitely huge upside. All right. So Gabriel, question. I have a question. What if MSTR tops before Bitcoin did, just like in the previous bull? So your question is, what if strategy already topped Out. So basically, your question is it's really a question related to Bitcoin. So let me just take off the indicators, and what you're questioning is, let me just draw this. So your question is, are we seeing a double top formation where Bitcoin isn't going to go up anymore and that it's going to have the same performance as the last bull cycle? Bitcoin will only, or strategy will only top if Bitcoin, doesn't, achieve this, continuation going up. And if it's the same double top situation as the last bull cycle. My forecast, Gabriel, is that that will likely not be the case. I do foresee Bitcoin to keep going up just with the whole macro scale update and just looking at, the 200-week moving average. Look at this. The last halving event, we had, yellow dots. Granted, we didn't see red dots, but we haven't even seen a breakout yet with this bull cycle. So this is an indicator, a very valuable tool where, let's say, if we see red dots, that may be overextending the current price. So we haven't seen that yet. So the price, hasn't really got into that FOMO herd situation where retail starts downloading Coinbase and, Robinhood to buy crypto. So that hasn't happened yet. So I do see the upside with Bitcoin to reach levels that, that we're expecting, into that 150, 250,000 range. All right. So, Alan, have you talked about Iron and Cypher? So, you know, let's take a look at Iron. So, Iron, they're performing very well just with the recent price action. I mean, on Friday, while everything was like going down, I mean, Iron was climbing up. I mean, there's a lot of upside with Iron. In fact, they just got, they just raised more capital, like hundreds of millions of capital to build out their AI infrastructure. So they have the facility, they have the approved energy. And as a result, we're seeing, it climb from like $5 to now over $10. So we've seen how high Iron, ran up, just in December of 2024, $16. So definitely do see Iron having that potential to get back to that level. The fundamentals are there. Why? Because they're the most efficient company when it comes to Bitcoin mining, so the margins are much higher. Now, they do sell every Bitcoin that's mined. They don't have Bitcoin hodl. Bitcoin price goes up. Will that favor companies like Iron? Yes, sure. With the, every month that they sell Bitcoin, they're selling at, profit at higher margins. But does that mean that they have a stronger position? Yes, Iron would prefer Bitcoin price to go up so that they can make more money, but overall, their their framework will only benefit the rollout of HPC AI. So I do see Iron having huge value as a long-term investment as it scales out its AI operations. All right, so Gabriel, do you see that the 4 year cycle is extending to Q1, Q2 based on the macro and the ISM and is still under the 50 level? So, Gabriel, that's a very good question. So, you know, there's been a lot of talks about whether, this cycle is it gonna, end, is it going to follow the same trajectory as what we saw in the last cycle? So if we apply the last historical cycles, it would be sometime around September and October. But now, given the fact that we have the government involvement, financial institutions involved, this really changes the game. Along with like public companies buying up Bitcoin like there's no tomorrow. I mean, there's not that much Bitcoin left. So this can potentially drive an extension of the cycle. I mean, Texas just got enacted, but what does this all mean? You establish SBR, but if you don't buy any Bitcoin, does that add any value, right? So we're going to start hearing a lot more government action, meaning they're establishing SBR and they're implementing by buying Bitcoin. You know, financial institutions, you know, BlackRock keeps buying Bitcoin. They're eventually going to get to 700,000 soon. Um, and is there going to be any Bitcoin left? I do see that the cycle may eventually extend out to Q1 of 2026. Here's the thing with Bitcoin. The last bull cycle we saw a big bear cycle. I mean, it dropped to like 18,000, but during that time, it was all backed by retail, right? This whole period of a drawback, you know, we didn't have any like, you know, government support. I mean, it was controlled by a non Bitcoin pro president. And then we had the birth of like ETFs, you know, around this time frame. You know, you had, you know, IBIT being created by Fidelity, you know. Since this time, you can think of it as the .com, the internet creation, where things just exponentially increase. And where there's huge volatility like this, there's not going to be huge volatility that will result in like a, you know, like a 65 to $18,000 drop. Now at most we may very well drop, let's say, you know, 80 to 70,000. You know, it may even go further, but there's no possibility for it to drop to 18,000. So that just shows the maturity of Bitcoin, and that any dips will be bought by these big trillionaire, billionaire folks. So I hope that answered your question there, Gabby Robo. Good question. So what other questions do you have? Please put it in the chat where we currently are right now. You know, Bitcoin hovering at 100,800. Much better than what we saw much earlier. So disregard all my ugly drawing. I'm not really good at drawing. All right. So Gabriel, regarding the Bitcoin, will it reverse at the 70 level, or this time there won't be an out season? Yes, the dips are less, but the outs are bleeding a lot. Yes. So here's the thing. I mean, you have Altcoin being created this year. You have, let's take a look. You know, you have Dogecoin, XRP. I mean, um, let's take a look. Solana at 131,000, big pullback. XRP at $2. Dogecoin, I mean, it went to like 35 cents not too long ago, but just the last 7 days, pulled back by 15%, 15 cents, huge drop off. Even the you know, Stellar Lumens XLM had a big pullback. Shiba coin dropping, you know, H bar dropping, you know, even the Trump coin dropping. So altcoins are taking a beating. However, I do think that altcoins are going to have a big run up um, in this cycle. So definitely, you know, when you're in altcoins, be prepared for volatility, but it'll come with rewards as well if you're holding on to altcoins, because Bitcoin will run and those will go into altcoins, and altcoins will you know, take action as well. So great question. All right. So what other questions do we have? So, you know, we talked a lot about, you know, obviously we know about the tensions going on with the airstrikes, and most of you are wondering, you know, is Bitcoin going to continue to go down, and how is this going to impact companies like, you know, MSTR? You know, I do see MSTR having huge upside, definitely undervalued. Riot as well. You know, we might see a pullback. It'll be interesting to see how the night markets open. All dependent on the market tomorrow. Riot, are we going to have a pullback this week? Who knows? It's going to be choppy, but we will see. I do believe that we will likely have a breakout. Why? Because every halving event has proven that we've had historical run-ups. I mean, look at these big banana zones. So is it going to follow the same history for the last three halving events? I'm bullish that those 12 years have shown for every 4 or 5 year cycle, we've seen a run up, and there's possibility that that's going to happen. So things are looking very good. Um, I am optimistically cautious that there's going to be potential run-ups for these companies. All right. So, what other questions do you all have? I know we've gone over the hour mark. Let's say if you're new to this, channel, thank you for watching. I hope you found this valuable. I would really appreciate, just liking the session and also subscribing to the channel if you find this valuable. But you know what? Bitcoin is a safe haven. It's really going to prove that it's the strongest asset. I wouldn't worry so much. Scale out long-term investing. Bitcoin will do its thing. It'll continue to go up, and these Bitcoin treasury companies are gonna, outperform. So I'm definitely very bullish, and I think that yes, while we're seeing all this news, dips will be gifts. And I appreciate you all joining. I hope you found this valuable content. Thanks for all of your support, and appreciate you all joining on. And hope you have a happy Sunday and a good evening. We'll do this again every Sunday. I put out daily contents with daily updates with Bitcoin and Bitcoin treasury stocks. So be on the lookout for these updates. But again, see you on the next one. Take care, guys.